Alrighty. Well, thank you, Mr. Belk. Mr. Belk is setting up the video, and as we talked about, this is the spring break video. So I hope everybody is enjoying your spring break. If you're at the beach, I wish I was there, but here I am in the classroom, all by myself. Not my favorite way of teaching, but it will work. I'm sure it will work. Let me remind you that our test will be on Tuesday, and as I said in class, the test will start with chapter 7, and that's the chapter on conditioning and learning, and then it will go all the way through chapter 10, which is where I'm going to cover today, motivation and emotion. Hopefully you are either in class and mark the ones that we decided to leave out, or if you happen to be absent that day. I know some of you had a school activity on that day, so if you were not here, please get with your classmates, not only for the notes for that particular day, but also to find out which ones that we left out for that day. Okay, let's get going again with chapter 9. If you'll recall in class, I went over the vocabulary on chapter 9, so we're ready to start with the questions. And the first question, well, let me back up and say, remember we're talking about cognition. And remember from the definition, we're talking about thinking. How do we think? And we've gone sort of in a logical progression. We've talked about the nervous system and the importance of the nervous system in carrying those neural impulses to and from the sense organs and to the muscles, but those same processes in the nervous system allow us to think. And remember this, the fancy word for thinking is cognition. Now the question is, how do we think? And obviously we're learning a lot more about thinking than we used to know before we had the technical devices like MRIs and PET scans and so on and so forth. But the first question is, what is internal representation? And if you see in the book, it simply says mental expression. But what does that mean? What does a mental expression mean? What this means basically, and what I'd like for you to capture for test purposes, is that when we talk about internal representation, is the idea that there is a world out here. For instance, if you look around on the video, obviously you see the screen, you see me. I'm not sure exactly how far the camera sort of pans out, but where you are, whether it be at the beach or wherever you are, if you look around and not only look but use the other senses, there's a world out there. Unfortunately, we don't take the world in directly. But what internal representation means is that we take in the world in a way that allows us to internalize it. So, there's a world out there, and we have to internally represent the world. We have to take that world in. Now, obviously, we think that we take it into our head, and obviously that is probably where those processes occur. But for test purposes, I'd like for you to think internal representation when we sort of internalize that world out there. Now, I was going to do a little class demonstration. It was going to be a very simple demonstration, but I was going to do something like this. I was going to hold up my keys and ask you to take a look at my keys and sort of visualize, my keys here. And I would do that, and sort of, let you see various ones of these sort of key fob things. And then what I would do is I would put the keys on the podium here, and I'd say, okay, tell me about the keys. What do you remember about the keys? Now, obviously, you would be able to tell me a lot of the details about the keys, and this would be an example of internal representation. The keys continue to exist out here, but you can't see them. You can't apply the senses to them. But you still know about those keys because you've internally represented. You've taken something that is in the outside world and you've put it inside your head in a way that you can sort of use the information and you can store the information, and that's what we refer to as internal representation. Now this leads into the next question, question number 2. The simplest way to internalize the world is through what we just said, images. And you know, when I held up the key and you looked at it, the keys that I have here, you form a mental image. You can actually, if I put the keys away, you can actually, for a short period of time, still see the keys. So what do we mean by mental image? It's an internal representation. It's a way of taking in the world that has picture-like qualities. Now this is a wonderful way to take in the world, and we share this way of thinking with other species. But the problem with mental imagery is the same problem that we have with computers. You know, if you send a text file, then it's not going to take up nearly as much computer memory space, the resources of your computer, as if you send like a video. And it's the same with our nervous system. That when we use mental imagery to think, it requires a lot of our brain resources. So this is why we need other methods, and that's what we're going to talk about next. But for test purposes, what I'd like for you to realize that a mental image is a way of internalizing, internal representation, taking in the world in a way that has picture-like qualities. Now, here we're sort of hedging a little bit because we're focusing on vision. But you can do the same with smell. You can do the same with hearing. You can do the same with touch. You can actually sort of remember that sensory memory that we talked about when we were talking about memory. We can actually take in the world sort of as an exact copy. Now, usually this type of internal representation doesn't last a long time, and that's another problem with it. But it is a way of internally representing the world, but it's not the most economical. And this is why, and let's move on to the next question. This is why humans have come up with this wonderful way of taking in the world and organizing the world, and this is what we refer to as a concept. And a concept is an idea that allows you to classify or organize things in a way that is easy to take in to your head, into your mental processes, to think about, to store, and also, we're going to talk, we talked about language, to communicate. So humans, human cognition is primarily conceptual. So for test purposes, a concept is an idea that allows you to sort of categorize and organize the world so that you sort of classify things that have similar characteristics. For instance, the concept of dog. You know, when I use the term dog, what that suggests is an animal with 4 legs, fur, you know, a cold nose, and goes bow wow. So this is a concept. A concept allows us to organize and classify the world, and we do it usually under, and going back to language, under a symbol. And the symbol in this case is DOG. Now there are different kinds of concepts, and the one that we use most often is what's called a conjunctive concept. And I just realized, since I have this projector up for something that we're going to do a little bit later. I can't write on the board, so I'm going to have to, I was hoping to sort of visualize that on the board. But a conjunctive concept is an and concept. It's one where we take the characteristics and we add the characteristics together mentally to come up with a concept. Now, just to go back to this idea of a dog. What's a conjunctive concept of a dog? A dog is an animal with 4 legs, fur, cold nose, and goes bow wow. So what are you doing? You're adding these characteristics together. For instance, if I said giraffe, what would be the difference? Mentally, you would organize this differently. Still, it would be 4 legs, fur, but then I would say long neck. And immediately you would shift from dog to giraffe. So a conjunctive concept is one where we add the characteristics together, and then when we add enough characteristics together, we go, aha, that's the concept. And our mental computer does this very, very, very quickly. Now there's another type of concept that is not conjunctive, and this is what we refer to as a relational concept. Now, I've cautioned you not to use circular definitions on the test. So the book actually uses a circular definition. It says that a relational concept is where we relate one thing to another. Well, that's sort of a circular definition. What does that mean? What a relational concept is when we categorize and classify something based on sort of comparing it or contrasting it with something else. For instance, I'm relatively tall. I'm 6'4". My wife is relatively short. So there's a contrast between me and my wife. Now, if someone saw our silhouettes, even if it was too dark to see the specific features, and you could just see the silhouettes, someone could probably say, well, that's Steve and that's Debbie, just by looking at the silhouettes, by comparing the height. So this would be referred to as a relational concept, where you are classified or categorized by comparison or by contrasting one thing or one event or one person to another. Another sort of illustration of relational concept would be, I have no students here, but Preston usually sits over here, Joseph sits over here, so let me use Preston or Joseph. Well, let me use Joseph, because I happen to know that Joseph has a brother. And I'm sure that at times Joseph has been referred to as David's brother. So Joseph would be categorized or classified according to what psychologists refer to as a relational concept. So our concept of Joseph would be relational. We're categorizing or classifying him in relationship to his brother. So that would be a relational concept. Now the last one is sometimes a little bit confusing, and this is what we refer to as a disjunctive concept. A disjunctive concept is an either-or concept. It means that we can categorize or classify